everyone. This is Mike Vanderbilt, and welcome to the Drinks on Monday interview number 5. Today we've got one from the vault as I talk with Chicago power pop luminary John Pazdan. Pazdan was one of the founders of Oak Park's premier power pop act Pezband in 1971. Pazdan, primarily a bass player, played around town in numerous jazz, rock, and pop outfits, including Chicago favorites Off Broadway. This interview was conducted in the spring of 2016 as I was preparing my Chicago reader piece, From Rockford to You, an oral history of Cheap Trick's early years. Pazdan is currently playing with Pezband alongside Betinis and Mick, and he'll be appearing at the Arcada Theater Friday, August 11th alongside Dwight Twilley and Zion's Own Shoes. It was a fun chat, and I hope you enjoy listening. Appreciate you giving me a call this morning.
Yeah.
So I'm taping this interview. I was going to say I'm doing this interview. I'm doing a piece for the reader about Cheap Trick's Club days, but I was also going to ask, we won't put all that political stuff in there, if I can use this on my podcast, because we're talking about the Pezband EP as well. And so,
listen, Mike, put the political stuff in there. I'm
hey, you know what? That's good radio.
It's more important to me than it really is.
Well,
I did a podcast about 6 weeks ago, and I think half of it was eventually came around to the political side of it.
This year you're not going to be able to get away from it, no matter what I was talking with Brad Elvis last night, and the last hour of our conversation was about politics. Like it's just going to happen, whether I want to. I say I don't like talking about it, but once I get going on it, like I'm absolutely in it.
But it's really important. To me, it's like more important than, well, whatever. Anyway, okay, so some things are important. Some things
it is more important, but we do want some people to buy your record. So
yes, we do. We I guess we do. I don't know how many are left, but we definitely.
So 30 years later, why are we revisiting the Women in Politics EP?
35 years. The guy, the backstory. So the guy that produced it was a friend of ours from high school,
yes.
Paul Brusek. And when he did it, he was right on, on the first rung of the military entertainment complex in Hollywood. And he called in all these favors, and Pezband had just lost their deal with Passport and everything else. And so he called in all these favors, and he thought he could get a licensing deal with DoM or with IRS, because he was in Los Angeles. So he's borrowing money from his mother and his friends, and he was a gopher at the record plant in L.A. And he got off studio for us, off time, at night and everything else. And we did this record with him, and then nothing. He couldn't sell it. DoM didn't want it, and IRS didn't want it. And I think at that time, there was kind of like a sea change in LA. So everybody was like, there was like that was when Van Halen was becoming like huge on one end. And
this would have been 1981.
Yeah, this is like 81 because we recorded in April of 81, and so he had like heavy metal and then all that weird, those hair bands, all that terrible music.
That was just starting off.
Yeah, and then at the other end, like in the supposed hip end, you had like Black Flag and then a lot of that stupid new romantic stuff when everybody had like black fingernail polish and shit like that. So
you had both decline. You had both decline of Western civilization movies. You had the hair metal thing starting, and you had the punk rock thing starting, and the new romantic thing starting.
Except punk rock in LA was. I don't know, because I was gonna be involved with some people out there that I liked after Pezband melted around, like the guys from the Gun Club, and I liked them, but it was just different. And power pop is like, it is power pop, like the Knack had run its course and everybody else. So anyway, Paul couldn't license that thing, and that pretty much was it for Pezband at that point. Within 6 months, Mick had moved to Florida with his young family, and Mimi ended up moving back to L.A. I stayed in L.A. for a while, and I came back here and started Insiders, which is insane. But I think that's what happened. Really, it was just like like the interest in power pop and that whole thing had run its course, and Paul just couldn't sell the record. So
now you started the Insiders back here or in L.A.?
No, here. Gary Yerkins and John Siegel.
Yeah,
and,
now that was kind of a power pop vibe to that too, right?
That was more like a roots rock thing, because that didn't really happen until like 85 or 86. I mean, I was doing other stuff. I was a studio guy for like a couple of years, and I did other stuff back here. But the Insiders were more like there was a whole like roots rocky thing happening around 85, 86.
No, that's not, yeah. I mean, I would say it maybe had something to do with maybe the Blasters.
Yeah, but it was more like John Cougar was real, like that kind of stuff was real popular back then. And I knew John Siegel, and I liked him a lot. I still do. He was in a great group with Brad called Screams.
Right.
And Screams used to open for Off Broadway a lot, so that's how I met John, and I really liked that. Screams was a great band.
Now,
they were wonderful.
You were recording with the Pezband trio in '81. When were you playing with Off Broadway?
When?
Yes.
Well, I started Off Broadway in '77, in like December of. I think our first gig was in December of '77, and then I left in the summer, early fall of '80.
That whole scene, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later. It's funny to me how incestuous it is, how everybody kind of jumped from band to band, and I can't keep it straight. Like I'll be talking to somebody about Pezband, and they'll be talking about Cliff Johnson, and I'll be, well, wait a minute, Cliff Johnson and Off Broadway. Oh wait, no, he was in Pezband, but then he left, but then Mimi took over, so, and it's hard to keep straight sometimes.
Well, to me it's called Off Pezway. It's like this one big band.
Because then Mimi ended up playing with Black and Blonde, which basically became Off Broadway again in the 90s.
Yeah, it's silly. It's like and you probably have relatives like this. It's like one big dysfunctional family.
No, that sounds like my family for sure.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's just like my family, where at any given point, I hate that guy, or that guy sucks, or he doesn't know. It's like, okay, whatever.
I deal with that. I deal with that too. And it's like, man, it ain't worth getting bent out of shape about it. I mean, you were talking about politics. Like, I have one uncle. I love him. He's my uncle, but I can't be Facebook friends with him because it's every day, all day. My mom tells me about the post that he's making. I'm like, oh, I can't. I couldn't. He wouldn't like what I'm posting either. So.
I've got people in my family who are libertarian, born-again Christians. I mean, there's a lot in common there.
So you came back to Chicago. Were you living in Chicago or Oak Park when you were doing the Insider stuff?
Actually, Chicago when I was doing the Insiders.
And how many records did the Insiders put out?
Oh, they put out one. Well, here's what happened. He started the Insiders with the four of us: John Siegel, Gary Yerkins, Jeff Thomas, and me. And then the band added this guitar player who ended up being the producer, Jay O'Rourke, and Jeff Thomas.
Oh, okay,
left.
Yeah.
Then Ed Breckenfeld replaced him, and then they weren't. The band wasn't doing anything. And the thing with me is that as a musician, I mean, I'm like a working musician. I always try to keep working, right? And so these guys were kind of like, oh yeah, we're doing this and writing all these songs and everything. It's like, yeah, but we have to go out and play and work.
Well, yeah, I mean, when
can't sit around here, fellas, it's like, and John Siegel was all for that, but the rest of the guys in the band, I don't know. So
when we were starting our first band, my first real band in my 20s, I remember my buddy saying, because we knew a whole bunch of people who were so intent on getting that perfect sound and crafting these songs in the garage.
Yeah.
But you need to play that first show to kind of blow the shit out and see how you perform together on stage, even if you're not 100% together. I mean, book a free night at the Mutiny, play, and then you got your first show out of the way. Now you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, but at that time, I mean, I was used to Off Broadway and Pezband and everything. We'd work a lot. I mean, and make a living at it. I mean, it was like kind of a bad living, but I mean, we didn't have to sell used cars or.
Well, that's something I noticed in talking to a lot of these guys, talking to Cheap Trick and the like. That a lot of y'all never really even worked a straight job. You were just
No.
gigging musicians and never, like you said, never had to sell used cars or do an office gig.
Well, you could do that from the late 60s, the very late 60s, up through, I don't know, like I want to say the mid 80s. I mean, there was a way to actually make a living. You were making a lower middle class living, but you were making a living. I mean, I tell it to people. It's like, hey, I used to go out and play 2, 3, 4 nights a week, even if I wasn't in a big rock extravaganza. I mean, I lived in Rogers Park for a while in the mid 70s and played like jazz and funk with different groups. And I could still work 2 or 3 nights a week, you know? I mean, it was incredible. It was like people went out and listened to music. And then all of a sudden, that weird thing, and I caught it in L.A. in the late 70s. It's like, oh, well, no, man, bands are paying to play at this club.
Right.
Like, what? You know, what is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, how many...
Don't do that anymore, you know? Like, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. What's wrong with you?
Well, because these days, particularly with, like, like when I was playing out in my 20s, more so like, you know, these young kids, I mean, they would play just to have a place to play, so they'd get away with not paying people. And if you dared ask for money, they're like, well, why have you come in and pay you guys? We don't know what you're going to draw. We're just going to let this band play for free and, you know, steal their money.
Yeah, and that's wrong. And I, you know, I'm like here again, it's political. It's like I'm, you know, like if 10208, if the local was on it and not just protecting the CSO and the guys that play in the pit bands for musicals. I mean, you know, 10208, when I was growing up in the late, I actually joined it with Pezband, and we played it. We played it. One of the first professional places Pezband played was the old club Rush up on Rush Street. And you played there 5 nights a week, or sometimes 6 nights a week, and you do like 3 or 4 sets a night. And we get booked in there, and it was like, you know, second night, Mr. Tadanko wants to, you know, I'm not trying to, you know, the union guy would pop by and go, boys, got your cards? And we were, what cards, you know? And then he'd explain what you had to do. And 3 days later, we're down at the Union Hall, you know, doing our audition, which consisted of, you know, play a C major scale. Okay, you're in. Now pay the fee. And we were in the union. I mean, and we were in the union, and we got paid union scale. So this is like 72, right? 1978. And we're playing on Rush Street. And yeah, man, you're making a living. And I tell people that it's like, this is what a union does. And there were places that you didn't want to play because they weren't going to pay union scale. And you really wanted to be in that union because you wanted to be protected the same way anybody else in a trade is protected. And I tell this to people, and they're like, oh, well, unions suck. It's like, well, no, not all of them do. You know, like you could be in the Portland, Oregon union, and, you know, they just had a thing a couple of years ago for a living wage for musicians. It's like, that's what a union does, you know, like they protect people. But in Chicago, it's been corrupt for so many years. It's just been terrible.
That's just how things get done in Chicago, right? Well,
yeah, I mean, they do protect the CSO. They negotiate with them. I mean, those guys are in the union. I have friends that play in Pitt, or, you know, the Michigan Avenue musicals and stuff like that, and they're protected. I mean, they make a good living doing that. But your average Joe, you know, playing in a club or something like that, they're not. They're completely run roughshod by the people that own the clubs, and that's wrong. And that's why a union was started in the fucking first place, right?
Yeah. So
okay, sorry. It's all political, Mike. It's all fucking political.
I tell you what, this is already turning into a wonderful interview. I am enjoying this. This is good.
Okay, good.
Now back to women in politics for just a minute before we go off onto something else. Was it always intended to be an EP, or were there plans to make this an LP? Now, you explained there was a lot of upheaval in the scene. Power pop had run its course. You eventually came back to do a roots rock thing. Did you want to make this a record?
I think we kind of ran out of studio time. Paul, like he blew through the favors, right? Because, I mean, we were getting comp time, which was unheard of at the record plant, and I think we just ran out of time. So there might have been, and I can't quite remember. We were talking about that the other day. I think there was another track that was never finished, and that we definitely had enough material to do an album. I think that we just ran out of comp time at the studio. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
the record plant in those days, I mean, Off Broadway did their first record there, and I had been there a couple of years ago doing that record, and I mean that was like the, you know, lay out the coke on the mixing board, boys. You know, it was like one of those kind of studios. Like, oh, we'll be in here for 24 hours for 9 months. You know, like that kind of shit. When we were out there, Fleetwood Mac was recording. What were they recording? Tusk out there.
Yeah, that would have been around the right time for Tusk. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they had like one whole room. You know, one of the studios. There were full studios in that place, and they had one whole studio. I think they had locked out for like 9 months or something. I can't even imagine how expensive that must have been.
They had the money at that point, and
yeah, I guess.
Now the EP the EP consists of yourself, Mick Rain, and Mimi Betinis. Now, you were a trio at this point. Why didn't Tommy Gawenda and Mike Gorman return to the full? And you were back at this point because you were not on Laughing in the Dark and
no, because we started Pezband in like 71, and I left about a year later, and I was playing guitar and piano in that version, and Mike was playing bass. And I was just, you know, it's like, it's a real long story, and I don't, you know, it's not even worth going into it. But what I did was switch from playing guitar and piano, being a half-assed guitar and piano player, to being a full-assed bass player. So I joined an all African-American soul group on the South Side, and I learned how to play bass, and it was a great time to learn how to play bass then, especially playing soul music. It was like Marvin, you know, we're doing like Marvin Gaye.
That bass stuff is phenomenal. Where on the South Side were you at?
Right around 79th and Racine.
Okay.
Is where we used to rehearse, and we used to play at a place called the Ridgeland Club, which, you know, I was a something white person in the Ridgeland Club. Right around, and Willie Dixon used to live right around the corner. It was a wonderful neighborhood in those days. So I did that, and I really liked the sound of bass, and it was like I became a musician, sort of, you know, and that's kind of what I did. And then I moved to Rogers Park, and ended up playing with like a fusion band, which is fun. And then I ended up playing with this guy who used to be in the Flock, Tom Webb. His name was T.S. Henry Webb.
Let me mention something about the Flock. When I was talking to Tom Peterson a couple weeks ago, and I was asking him, like, hey, what local bands, you know, got you going? And one of the bands he brought up was the Flock. And when I was talking to Brad Elvis last night, he talked about the Flock, but it's like I had never heard of them before. This is the third time I've heard about the Flock. Now, Tom said they were an excellent live act that didn't translate well to the record, but he said he likened them to like Frank Zappa and the Mothers.
I would agree with that, except they went through a bunch of different, like the Flock. It was always the Flock, but when the Flock started out, they were like a Brit invasion band, along with like kind of like the I don't know, you know, the Crying Shames. I mean, they were in that kind of ballpark. And then they got a horn section, and all of a sudden they were like doing these cool kind of like soul tunes for a while. And then Jerry Goodman joined, who was the electric violin player, and he used to be a roadie with them, but he was a classically trained violin player. His parents were like, one of them was in the CSO. And once he joined, man, it was like all of a sudden they were just like this like jazz rock fusion thing.
Right.
Really fucking incredible live. I mean, it was really nuts. And Tom Webb, T.S. Henry Webb, was one of the saxophone players in that band. And they took off, and they were managed by Aaron Russo, who used to run the Kinetic Playground in Chicago. That was like the precursor of, let's say, the Metro.
Yeah, that was like the hot club. That came up quite a bit. Like if you were playing in a city, that was the place to play.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we saw like Jeff Beck and the The Who, Buddy Rich, and Joe Cocker one night, $3, 2 sets each band. How's that?
Oh my God.
It was a genetic playground. So Aaron had a lot of money, and he managed the flock. So, you know, he got him a record deal with Columbia. And for a while there, like in 1970, they're playing at the Isle of Wight opening up for Hendrix, right?
Right.
I mean, they were big. They were huge. And then what happened was Jerry Goodman ended up joining Mahavishnu Orchestra. And that was pretty much it. You know, then the band kind of broke up after that.
So,
Tom Webb T.S. Henry Webb had a solo career going for a while. It's all Chicago rock history.
It's awesome. Like I've been enjoying doing this piece because I've been finding out so much more about Chicago rock history, and kind of an era that you don't hear a lot about. I mean,
right.
It is kind of this forgotten little time, particularly like let's say 71 till about 81 in Chicago rock history. It's been interesting for sure. So now you came back to Pezband because Tommy and Mike left.
Well, as a matter of fact, Mike had left because Mike joined Off Broadway. It's like
right.
They switched jobs or something. You know, it's really weird. So, when we started rehearsing, Tommy was there, and as a matter of fact, the first gig we did, we played at Tuts, you know, on well, it's not there anymore. That
was kind of the punk rock club, wasn't it? Or what?
Yeah, it was. Well, it used to be the Quiet Night, and it was really cool. They used to have folk music there, and you know that's where you go to see. It went through a whole bunch of different things, and then for a while, the Quiet Night. I mean, I saw Chick Corea's, The Return to Forever with Stanley Clarke and Lenny White there, and it was like, wow, this is great, you know. And then it turned into like the Punky Wunky play. You know, it was like all these different clubs. So when Pezband started playing again, I think it was like the winter of 80 or 81, I can't remember. The first gig we did with Tommy, it was the quartet with Tommy, and then we were like, oh, you know, he didn't really do it. And because he had started up this other band called The Tammy Show with the two girls from Wilmette. They had like 10 minutes. They had their 10 minutes, and so we were like, who fucking needs them? We'll do this as a trio, and that changed the sound of Pezband right then, because I wasn't going to be like, you know, doing the power pie. You know, I don't even like the Beatles, Mike. You know what I mean?
Wow. You know what? Hey,
sorry, I have to mention that.
That's the most all the political stuff we talked about earlier. That's probably the most controversial thing you've mentioned, was that you don't really like the Beatles.
Well, no, I really don't, and it's, well, I mean, it's not like I hate them or anything. It's just
I was the same way.
So much stuff I like more. I mean, I like the Who a lot more. I like the Yardbirds a lot more. I like PIL a lot more. I like Miles Davis a lot more. I like Howlin' Wolf and Tom Waits a lot more. But I mean, so the Beatles are like, yeah, blah, blah, blah.
I was the same way in high school. Like, I mean, obviously there's a bit of an age gap, but when I was in high school, like the anthologies were real popular. So the Beatles kind of had a second thing with the youngsters, and I was just I liked them okay. Like same thing, I liked them okay, and I owned the record. I bought the box set, and obviously I had to go back and realize that all the music that I loved was obviously influenced by the Beatles. But yeah, I'd rather listen to Cheap Trick. I'd rather listen to Replacements. I'd rather listen to the Who. But I mean, I don't dislike them, but I probably got to like them a little bit more as I got older, once I realized how much influence there was. But yeah, I mean, my mom, she liked the Beatles okay, but she preferred the Raspberries.
Okay, so like my brother, who is 7 years older than I am, so he's really old. like he was coming up through college and shit when the Beatles were coming in. He was like, I hate this shit. You know, he listened to Ray Charles records. It's like, right. And
that's funny to me, because the Beatles seems like they were so ubiquitous in the 70s. But yeah, there were a lot of people, just like today when something popular comes out, there are a lot of older people who are kind of like, that's kid stuff. That's nonsense.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I also really, really like great African American music. I mean, I love Howlin' Wolf, I really do, and I love like James Brown, and I love Marvin Gaye and Miles, and I love the great jazz guys. So it's like, yeah, and I know people, it's like, that's all they can talk about are the Beatles and the Beatles. And it's like, geez,
Well, no, it's
more to life here, Chief.
It's funny that's one of the big hooks in the article is, I mean, all the bands that came around that time were obviously, I mean, that I was talking to were very influenced by the Beatles. That's where power pop kind of came from. But when I mentioned it to the guys from Cheap Trick, like Robin Zander was telling me, he's like, Rick never really liked the Beatles either. So it's kind of this for Cheap Trick being called the Midwest Beatles, like it's kind of a misnomer because it wasn't they seem to be more influenced by the Who and the Alex Harvey band than
exactly or the Move or something.
The Move is like the precursor to Cheap Trick if you really look at it.
Yeah, it is. And I had this thing with another band I started in the 80s with Big Guitars from Memphis, and that was in reaction to a lot of shit. But,
what was the name of this band?
Big Guitars from Memphis.
Big Guitars from Memphis. Okay.
Yeah, and my thing is, well, the national teams were from London, so we can be from Chicago. Anyway, we did Europe. The band was kind of successful in Europe and in Scandinavia, and the first tour we did there, we were touring for a couple of weeks with the guy Tony Sheridan. I don't know if you know who he is.
That name sounds very familiar.
He was the Beatles' mentor from Liverpool.
Okay.
And he's why the Beatles ended up in Liverpool, and he's why Brian Epstein signed the Beatles, because they backed him up on his first record. And some guy came in Brian Epstein's record store in Liverpool looking for the Tony Sheridan with the silver Beatles. It's a Beatles story. But okay, so here's a guy like kind of like Pete Best almost, or something like that. Like was a contemporary of the Beatles, actually maybe a little bit older, that had brought them into the scene. And here, I'm driving around like Aarhus with Tony Sheridan, and it was really interesting because when he went on, you would think that he'd be be doing Beatles, or he'd be doing like Teddy Boy stuff, like early, like pre-Beatles. And he'd come on and he'd do All Right Now by Free for 20 minutes. And that was really, that was really fucking interesting to me.
Absolutely.
It's like, we're gonna play All Right Now. Yeah. Okay.
That is a cool song. That is a cool song.
Yeah, but I mean, to see a guy like that, because who else was on the tour? Tremolos were on the tour, and they were from Liverpool, and they were like as old as the Beatles.
Yeah,
they had been around for a long time, and they were all like, they looked like Spinal Tap when they came out. They had like black leather pants, and it was like, wow, what's going on here?
Well,
you would expect them to be Merseyside and wearing like everyone dresses up like a power pop idiot.
Well, that's what's so
the clothes.
That's one of the.
It's not. Yeah.
That's one of the funny things.
What it appears.
That's one of the funny things for me about like the '80s when for that 1 minute where Jane Pauley said that power pop was the sound of the future, and they mentioned Pezband, was that then you also had the Searchers basically rebranded themselves as an early 80s power pop band, and Herman and what's his name, Peter Noon, came out with the Tremblers, and he's out there trying to look like the Records with a bunch of songs written by Tom Petty. So
it's just entertainment. I mean, it's kind of shallow and it's entertainment. I mean, there's really good power pop stuff. And obviously the Who was the first power pop band.
He coined the phrase. Pete Townsend coined the phrase.
Yeah, and I keep telling, I get in these arguments, all the Beatles is like blah, blah, blah. If you want to see what power pop is, it's on YouTube, and anybody can look this up. There's a video of the Who playing at the Marquee in London, which was their home base, in March of '67, and they're doing this wonderful Who tune called "So Sad About Us," which is actually the blueprint of all power pop. It's not the Beatles; it's the Who doing "So Sad About Us," and you see them playing live, and like Pete's like all pissed off, he can hardly play. John Entwistle is laughing at everybody, and he's louder than everybody. Moon is like just wonderful. I mean, he's beating the shit out of it. Roger Daltrey can't hear anything, so he's singing completely out of tune. And you're watching them do this song, and it's just great. and you get sucked into it, and then the camera, and it was like, I don't know what, it's one guy holding the camera pulls back, and I was at the Marquee Club, and it was a very small place. The camera pulls back, and all you see are people dancing. And that's it, man. It's like, this is fucking teenage dance music, you know? It's really good, but it's not like this sacred, weird, like, ooh, it's power pop. It's like, this is like people having fun, and these guys are really great. And that would bring us to Cheap Trick, because when I used to go to see Cheap Trick in the mid-'70s, that's what it was. There were people like dancing and having a good time, and they were having a fucking blast. And that was it. That's it. You know, it's right there.
So as long as we're on a roll about it, let's talk a little bit about the club days at Cheap Trick. Now, I was talking to Lori Rohig from who used to own Clubfoot, and she was there at Hump and Hannah's in '75 when they still had Zeno. Right. And she was talking about their audience, and when I talked to the guys in the band, they're talking about their audience. Like up in Milwaukee, they said it was a real weird crowd. It was like almost like the Warhol gang that was really into it.
Yes.
Them.
Yeah.
Now, you said you saw them in the mid-'70s. Like, what did you notice from the crowd? Like, when was the first time you saw Cheap Trick, actually?
I'm trying to remember that, and it might have been like at the Thirsty Whale or some dive like that, or it might have been at the Night Gallery.
Probably the Night Gallery, because I was doing in my research, like Thirsty Whale opened up about '81 from what I found out, but
no, they opened up like '74,
Did
75. They? Oh yeah. That place has been around for a long time.
I never got to go. I was just a little bit too young, so that was around in '70. So there's the Thirsty Whale. And I know Night Gallery wasn't like one of their spots that they played, although, and the Night Gallery was open till 6
to Rockford.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in Waukegan, and the Night Gallery was a real funny place because it'd be open till like
6 a.m. is what I heard.
Yeah.
You'd be leaving the place and the sun would be up.
Well, they had wooden shutters on the windows, and when you open the shutters, it was like you expected half of the club to evaporate because everybody was like, "I'm fucking sad." And by the end of the night, because Great Lakes Naval Base, that's who was in there at the end of the night, because all the drunken sailors and shit would come in and try to pick up girls, right?
Right.
I think girls, maybe boys too. I don't really know, but
it was the '70s. It was a very pervasive time. Like.
Yeah, starting at about 2 or 3 in the morning, all of a sudden the whole, everybody, the crowd would shift to like drunken sailors and shit, and then there would be the typical rock girls still hanging out there. But that was, I don't know, that was kind of a dreadful place, really.
What were the rock? What were the? Yeah, that seems to be the general consensus amongst people. It's like, yeah, we played there and it was fun, but man, what a dreadful place. What were the rock girls like back then? Like, I mean, this is pre-hair metal, so like, what was the look that was popular?
It's really hard to say. Boy. The girl, I mean, the typical.
I mean, that's why we all start bands, right? That's why we all start bands, to meet girls, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was up until a point. Until I started playing bass, I would probably agree with you. Until I decided to go down the slippery slope of being a musician. But I don't know. I mean, they pretty much it's pretty much the same thing. The girls who were attracted to bands, and boy, I mean, Cheap Trick, well, and Off Broadway too, and it used to have a lot of girl fans because they had both bands very charismatic lead singers, So, here's the lead singer.
Everybody likes the lead singer.
Everybody likes no.
The girls all like the lead singer. I remember my guitar teacher telling me the girls all want to talk to the lead singer, and all the teenage boys want to talk to the guitar player about tone.
Yeah, which is a good thing about playing bass again in a rock band, so nobody talks to you at all.
You can just get away and have a drink.
Goodbye. See you later. Right? Who cares?
And nobody wants to talk to the drummer because nobody wants to help him break down his equipment.
Yeah. Plus, they're all sweaty and shit. So the Cheap Trick was really good, and they were really different from the typical bands at that time. So in the mid-'70s, and again, now I'm coming at this mid-'70s thing from a different perspective than anybody else, because I was playing like funk and African American music and fusion and all sorts of weird music. I wasn't really like part of the wonderful world of rock entertainment. But
you were coming from a completely different circle where these guys were coming from.
Yeah. It's like I had gone to this other weird side, of music, and
aside that, not a lot of these musicians probably had a part in. I mean, playing on the south side of Chicago.
Absolutely none of them had a part in that. I mean, there wasn't one person I know who did that. And so when I started going back into the rock thing after I quit playing with T.S. Henry Webb, and it was like, go see what's going on here. And that was like 76, 77, and I started listening to like what was coming out of England then, and I liked the Sex Pistols a lot. And because it kind of reminded me of the Who.
Well, people don't give the Sex Pistols enough credit for being very good musicians.
Oh, fuck, they were great, man. Are you kidding? I mean, they were really good. And
that's before punk meant like being just sloppy or not knowing how to play your instrument. Like, they were just a really good band with a lot of attitude.
They were really a good band. And you know who else was really good back then was Graham Parker.
Oh, I love Graham Parker.
Yeah, but see, that's the other deal. I started listening to that because I liked R&B a lot, and they were trying to do R&B, but
they were doing it in a very British sort of way.
Yeah, except not when they started. That was the interesting thing. So in '76, I saw Graham Parker on their first tour. So that's that far back. They were in Chicago playing in a little club on Lincoln Avenue, right near where Lounge H used to be, called Ratso's. And that was like the big place to go if you're in Chicago, or you're going to Ratso's. It's like the showcase club. And years later, I produced a guy, a really good singer-songwriter, never went anywhere. The drummer in that band was Steve Goulding, who was the drummer in The Rumor. And he had played with Elvis. He's the drummer on Watching the Detectives, the great intro.
Yes.
And that's, yeah. So I'm sitting there talking to him one night, and I go, I realize it's like, you were in the Grand 76. I said, I saw you in 76. And he started laughing. And he said, they were on a tour of America, and him and Andrew, the bass player, they're on the station wagon with the rear-facing seat. Remember those, like an old station wagon?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's how they saw the USA. They were out the rear window of like a 76 LeSabre station wagon. So, I don't know, but anyway. So
you go back. So
music,
Night Gallery. Night Gallery was one of the spots, and you saw Cheap Trick there.
Yeah, and I saw him like at Thirsty Whale or something. I started seeing their name, and it was like, and then I went out to see him. This guy dragged me out, and it was like, this is pretty cool, because they were doing stuff like, the song I remember them doing was the Ballad of Richard Speck.
Right.
Now, you know that tune?
Yes, I do, because they eventually changed it to the Ballad of TV Violence for the record. But it's a very, I mean, you want to talk about having lurid subject matter and being proto-punk, like, that's it there.
That could be on a Sex Pistols album, right?
Absolutely.
It sounded like it. I mean, and they sounded like the Who, and it was the same setup as the Who. Tom is, it's like, wow, it's John Entwistle. This is cool. You can play like that in a rock band now. You don't have to go bloop 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 anymore.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And Rick, and he sort of like what the Pezband trio does. And I mean, I play like that when I play rock music. The bass is just like overbearingly loud and ignorant,
Well, yeah.
That's how I play when I play with the Pezband trio. But and Rick, Rick would just kind of like be running around like a madman, and it was very cool. I loved it, Now, and they didn't sound like anybody else though. See, that time, it was really weird. It was like punk hadn't hit, or it had hit, but people were still in the suburbs, so they were still trying to be like in Deep Purple in 1971 or something, and they had Fu Manchu mustaches and all this weird shit. It was like, I don't like that kind of music. I don't like heavy metal from the 70s, you know what I'm saying? That kind of stuff. And they weren't like that. I mean, they were more like the Who or the Sex Pistols. At least I saw them as being like that.
So now, did Pezband share some bills with them? But you probably weren't playing with them at that point.
No, but Off Broadway did, because Off Broadway was managed by the same guy.
It seems everybody who was anybody in Chicago was managed by Ken Adamany back then.
Yeah, or as I would say, can't add the money, but that's between you and me. The lamppost. Ken went way back with Cheap Trick. Now, Ken was, oh God, did they tell you the story of this? This is the ballad of Ken Adamany.
No, but I would love to hear it. I think this would be. I mean, already I will say, like, I've got this article in pretty good shape. I want to turn it in by Friday, but it's at 4,000 words. I'm like, this thing is a monster. They're going to end up taking all the good stuff out.
I'm sorry. Well, all right. So Adamany came from a wealthy family from Janesville, Wisconsin, and he went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison, right?
Right.
For school. He's like 10 years older than I am, 8 years older than I am. And I was like, I didn't really know that much about him. You know, he had a booking agency, and by the time I knew him at first, he had a booking agency in Madison called Adamany Toller. He had a partner named Toller. But he wasn't managing anybody, but he was really in tight with Rick. And they had the band Fuse that was signed to Epic for a thing.
Cruising for Burgers was their big hit, I think, right?
Yeah. And that's when I met Rick, because he's an inveterate guitar hustler, and he was back then. And a good friend of mine who passed away this year, Bumblebee Bob Novak, he was a great blues musician in Oak Park. He was a great painter too. He was a guitar hustler, and that's how Rick ended up selling an amp to him. This is like 71 or 70, you know, with Fuse written on the. So anyway, that's how we ran into Adamany. And Adamany, I don't know if he was in the band after Fuse was called Sick Man of Europe.
Right. And they were they were playing in Philadelphia.
Well, they were and they weren't. But he was in that, and then Adamany started booking stuff. Adamany, you know, is responsible for killing Otis Redding. You know about that?
No.
Well, not really, but I mean, he used to book this club in Madison called the Church Key.
Okay.
And he booked Otis in the night that the plane went down at Lake Mendota. So, and you know, I can't remember if it's true or not, and you'd have to fact check this, but I believe the name of the band that Nielsen was in was supposed to open up was called the Grim Reaper.
No, absolutely.
And they changed the name.
Yeah.
That's the name of the band.
That story is 100% true, at least by Cheap Trick terms.
Woo!
Yeah, creepy.
Yeah.
Very creepy.
So anyway, Adamany gets involved with this, and he's been working with, you know, Rick for a very long time, really. I mean, all his life, and Adamany Toller, the booking agency, booked Pezband in the early days, but I was in that band when they were booked. So he knew Cliff, and then Off Broadway started getting like a lot of attention playing in the clubs, and which led to a record deal and everything else. But the band never would have had a record deal if it wasn't for Adamany, because he had carte blanche with, you know, like Cheap Trick had just done Budokan. They're like on the cover of Rolling Stone. So people were like, "Hey, Ken, who else you got?" You know, and so he got us a record deal without ever doing a demo. Isn't that amazing?
That's absolutely fast. I mean,
but that's how powerful he was. It's like, oh yeah, and we were a great live band, and we had fans and everything. But I mean, that's pretty nuts.
So Adamany, I mean, he really kind of was like he was a hustler behind the scenes, and he was making this stuff happen.
Yes, and he had the clout. I mean, you know, that's how things are done. I mean, they're not done because you're a great band or anything. You're done because you're a great band, and then you have a manager that has clout, or, you know, last 20 years it's because you know a lawyer in L.A. But,
now, Adamany kind of fell off the face of the earth from what everybody told me. Like he's a hard man to track down.
Well, yeah, they had a huge falling out, and with Cheap Trick, and I mean, talked to Brad Elvis. I mean, he managed the Elvis Brothers for a while.
Yes.
He managed another band. I knew the drummer from a group. Actually, the drummer had been in Off Broadway for a while. It was called Combo Audio, and they were pretty good. They were like a new romantic blah blah band. Adamany, though, just moved back to Madison after this big lawsuit, and from what I know, then he had cancer for a while. He was sick, and then he's back on his way. So he was doing like the Madison Blues Festival, I think, for a while, and then joined up with some guy, and they have a company, but he keeps a super low profile in that company. And they were booking like the Dane County Coliseum and shit like that. But you couldn't get a hold of him. I tried to get him to book Pezband about 5 years ago. I mean, he wouldn't, like, it's like trying to call, a Dick Cheney or something.
That's what it seemed like, because I mean, I've been able to track down pretty much any interview I wanted for the most part. Like I was able to just get through Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he was always like that though. Really, really, he was always kind of like, he has a bodyguard and he's real, blah, 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 like that. So
you were talking about trying to get him to book Pezband a couple years ago. Now, how did the Pezband reunion happen in 2007? Because now, for someone like me, I got into Pezband when I was about 22, around 2002. And it was a band who I fell in love with, but I never thought I'd be able to see Pezband again. But then you guys got together for the International Pop Overthrow in 2007, right?
Oh, okay, so what happened was I started listening. I was married to my first wife at the time, and I had this giant like barrel of cassettes in my garage, and I occasionally I would listen to what we were doing in like 81 and 82, and it was really good, and the live stuff was really good. So I just said, fuck it, this might be really interesting, and I kind of got in touch with those guys again, and I goosed up a couple of the songs on a cassette I had from live, and I sent to them. I said, "Wow, who's this band?" So they were like, "Ooh, good."
And you say the other guys you're talking about, Mimi and Mick, right?
Yeah. And so that's how it got back together then. And then we played a while, and it just kind of seemed to run out of steam. Then the guy Paul Brusek called me like completely out of the blue. He sent me a CD of Women in Politics, and it was his 60th birthday. And he goes, it's on my bucket list. And by now, Paul Brusek is like a rainmaker. He's like fucking president of movie music at Warner Brothers. Actually, at the time, he was at New Line Cinema.
Right.
He had done Austin Powers. He had done all this shit. And he goes, yeah, it's on my bucket list. I'm going to finally put this out. So I went, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. So,
it's been sitting on the shelf for 30 years. Like, I hope it does something.
Yeah, it's like, this will do me a lot of good. So, he's like calling us up. We're on conference calls with him and everything. He's flying over the Alps to go produce Brian Ferry at some studio in London. It's like, okay. And he's going to get this promo company to push it out and everything else. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm not talking to him at all. I mean, he won't return the phone call. It's like it just disappeared.
I do remember that, because I remember after you guys did the show in 2007, there was you did a couple more, because I remember coming to see you guys at Fitzgerald's summer, and you were out playing, and I kept hearing about this record that you were doing that was 30 years old, and then all of a sudden I didn't hear anything, and I was like,
I know
they must be fighting with each other or something, who knows.
No, it was like this guy completely dropped the ball, and I don't know why.
I guess it was Paul Brusek, who had recorded it back 30 years ago. Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So then we kind of split up for a while, and
was it fun playing that first show back at the Abbey Pub? I mean, to see that crowd, like, that place was sold out. That place was packed that night to come see you guys.
Yeah, it was fine, except I don't like that IPO thing much. I mean, I really don't. I mean, some people play it and are perfectly fine with it, and I have a couple issues with it.
Well, you don't get paid, that's for sure.
Well, that's my main issue, and I really don't like that. I mean, it's like, it's fine if you're like a hobbyist or something, but it's like, fuck, man, like I'm not a hobbyist,
Yeah. I'm actually surprised. I'm surprised they wouldn't shell out the bucks for for Pezband at least. Like the Romeros don't get paid, but the Romeros have never gotten paid. So why should we start now?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So it's like, well, then if you don't want to get paid and you just want to do it for fun, great. But we don't. We would like to get paid for doing this.
You're in the union, for Christ's sakes.
Well, except I'm not in the union. I've been in the union about 6 times now in my life. I think I have a pension of 30 cents a week coming any moment. But yeah, I mean, so that was fun when we started playing again. And then what really opened it up was we did a show. Todd Novak from Hozak Records did a little power pop thing at the Empty Bottle.
Yeah, I remember that, and I missed it, and I wanted to go. Yeah, what a great lineup that was.
That was, but the band was just fucking killing. There's YouTube stuff of that we really sound like, I think Pezband as a trio sounds like in those YouTube things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's there. So we got this great reaction from that. It was like, wow, this is wonderful. And then it's like, we put out this other record, Airmail Records in Tokyo wanted to license some more Pezband stuff, so there was another album that the band had in the can, but I wasn't on it. It was like the 4th Pezband album that was done, but then the band got dropped and didn't have a chance in hell of coming out.
Right.
So Hiroshi at Airmail put that out in Tokyo, and I said, great, but who cares if the record's out in Tokyo? I want to go and play in Japan. And so, like, that was part of the deal of having the record, him put out the record as he'd bring us over to Japan. Because I've been going to Japan 4 times in my life to play, and every fucking time, like, at the last minute, something happened.
So you've never made you'd never made it over there.
No, it was like what? Somebody gonna get sick? Is the band gonna break up? Did someone die? Like what happened? And so anyway, we ended up going in a blast. I love Japan. It's like, what's going on there? Anyway.
So yeah, they dropped the ball on women in politics.
Oh yeah, okay. So but we had a little bit of momentum. So we did the Empty Bottle show. We played it in Japan. Then the following spring, they had a power pop thing at Bell House in Brooklyn, and we went there and had a blast. And we did a bunch of dates with Twilley, and I like playing with Twilley a lot. So that's really cool. But then it's like, oh, now what? Like we really need something to promote. We didn't have anything to promote. And then out of the blue, Scott Carlson comes out, he has like this little label in Houston, and he's like, "Wow, I heard all about this stuff, and I want to put the record out." And
did you guys have a relationship with Scott Carlson before that, or did he just track you guys down?
It's completely out of the blue. It's like, what? Because I tried to get the record license. I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't trying. I mean, I went to Cherry Red, and they were interested, but they didn't want to give us anything. I went to Burger, and they didn't want it, and I went to like Indies and stuff, but nobody was interested. I ended up talking to Scott, and I really like him. He's like become a friend of mine, and he grew up in Elgin, and his parents were huge Pezband fans, and he grew up listening to Pezband.
That's what Mimi was telling me. Like, he grew up listening to this stuff on the 8-tracks in the station wagon.
Yeah, which is kind of cool,
Well, yeah, the reason all these interviews are really happening is because I was up inebriated one evening, and I was posting pictures of, I was listening to a Pezband record, and Scott Carlson just messaged me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to hear the new EP?" I'm like, yeah, and I never met this dude before. I didn't know who he was, and then I got to talk to him about it, and I said, "Well, I'll work out something. We got an exclusive going up, an exclusive stream of the record going up next Monday on the AV Club."
Cool.
Yeah, so that's how he wrangled up the Mimi interview, and then I was like, well, shit, I should just talk to everybody in the band then.
Yeah.
So Scott Carlson,
he's a great guy, and he's really tapped into a lot of the same stuff I am. Like, he really likes pre-World War II blues. I mean, we're like Blind Willie McTell fans, I mean. Yeah, who's a Blind Willie McTell fan? I am. He is.
He just bought some box set that I think he tagged you in when he was down at South by Southwest.
And I'm twisting his arm and making him, send them to me in MP3 file. he likes to make instruments, and I do too. I mean, he's like a, you know, he made a steel guitar for himself. It was pretty cool. Cigar box guitars. I like that geeky shit too.
Oh, sure.
So we have a lot of weird stuff in common. But just the fact that he did it. I mean, he has a full-time job. I think he's a archivist at in Houston. Is it Temple or Rice? One of those places.
Yeah.
University. So. I mean, he got this full-time gig, man. He just did this as a labor of love, and it's like this is wonderful, you know. I mean, and the reaction to this record so far has been like pretty good. I mean, I haven't read like any bad stuff, and usually by this time there's like, God, this record sucks.
Well, yeah, it's 30 years old. You know, what is this? You know, but like I listened to it and I was blown away. It was so good. I mean, it suggests that a Pezband really could have gone for another 10 years doing rock, and who knows what happened, why it didn't.
Yeah, because it had evolved out of a certain thing. It kept growing. In other words, it wasn't like the same Pezband that was around in 1975. You know what I mean?
Right.
The musicians in it had kept going, but that doesn't mean anything unless there's a commercial, unless the commercial net is up there. Plus, you get people going into their 30s who have wives and maybe want to start a family and blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, the priorities shift, and that's kind of what happened, too. So, Mick had a family, he had a job offer in Tampa, and then there he goes, and he had 2 kids. So that enters into it too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, people get responsibilities. I mean, even at lower,
or different responsibilities.
Yes. Well, yeah. I guess I refer to. I mean, I always joke about being in a band and being, it's being a lark, but it's not. It's a business. It's like you're working for.
It's hard work.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard work, and really, unless you like hit the lottery, it's not a very lucrative gig. I mean, so. If you're down with that, if you're down with being a musician and making what a musician makes, then it's fine, and I'm down with that. But a lot of people aren't. A lot of people have wives who are like, isn't it time you put the guitar away? It's like, yeah, for you, that might be right, but then you always wonder why you got married to that person in the first place.
Every time I'm in a band with somebody who gets a girlfriend or a wife or something, like, oh, it's over, isn't it? It's all over. I'm just gonna have to find new players.
Yeah, I'm my current second wife is an artist. She's an excellent artist, and so she has an artist temperament. And she gets what's going on.
She understands a little bit more. Like, yeah, you need to have somebody.
Yeah, and I understand her too. I mean,
yeah.
It's like we're artists here, and this is what's going on, and we're never going to be rich from this shit. But it's like we like what we do.
Hey, there's something to be said for that. I mean, I went to school and got my accounting degree and thought, this will be a good way to make money, and I went and did it for 2 years and hated it, and then kind of fell into this writing thing. And I tend bars still, and I had do I have as much money as my buddy who's a pharmacist? Not necessarily, but I'm happy. Like, I'd rather do this than sitting in that office all day.
Whatever happened to that? It's like, you just want to make music or make art or, or write. And I have a lot of friends who are writers, especially in London. And it's like, God, I mean, these guys they're my age, man. They still struggle. Musicians I know are still struggling. And struggling in the fact that they're not making as much, as whatever, but also struggling with their art every day. I mean, it's hard being an artist. It's hard being a writer.
Absolutely it is.
It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, and money aside, I'm saying it's not an easy thing to do.
It's nicer when you're getting paid. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you struggle with integrity, and you struggle with like, am I improving as an artist? I mean, there's a lot of other questions here. And those to me are the important questions more than the money angle of it. They always have been. I'm like that. I don't know. People that are successful that's what defines a success. It's not how much money they're making. It's whether they're making it. Are you a better writer now than you were 2 years ago? Are you a better musician than you were 15 years ago? You know,
I'm a better writer. I'm a better writer than I was a year ago, but I've been the same shitty musician for about 20 years. So
okay, but you're thinking, but you're a writer. I mean, you're you know, I mean, if you threw your nuts in with being a musician, you'd probably say the same thing as you just told me as being a writer.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
You know, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I equate anybody like that. I equate musicians, dancers, writers, you know, anybody involved in something that's outside, that's not a commercial thing, that's not outside of that, and they consider themselves in the arts. I consider that we're all the same. We're all in the same fucking boat here.
And we're all struggling.
Yeah.
So let's talk.
That's it. I mean, what are you supposed to do? You know, sit in like a fucking cubicle and add up some numbers. I don't.
Oh God, I was so miserable. I was so miserable in that office. But let's not get into that. Let's talk about the EP a little bit. I wanted to go maybe song by song and talk to you a little bit about it. So the the EP kicks off with Office Girl, and I thought even though we discussed your distaste for the Beatles, it has a very British invasion vibe, but it also features those Roadhouse blues licks. And intertwines it with kind of a Beatles-esque yeah from my point of view. What was the songwriting process? What are your thoughts on Office Girl? What can you tell me about it?
There was, I can't remember the name of the band though, and it might have been somebody like the English Beat at that time that was floating around. But that's where that vibe came in. That, you know, it's like a surf thing actually. But that was about as punky wonky as it got. So I had to fuck it up, and I had this set of a synthesizer, a Moog synthesizer, but it was controlled by your feet. It was like a set of bass pedals at the time, and I loved using them. I used to use it with Off Broadway, because the sound of that coming through like a 50,000 watt PA is just the most wonderful thing in the world.
Mimi mentioned that you were a big fan of pedals and effects. You always liked experimenting with that stuff.
I still am. So I had that thing, and if you listen to the beginning of it, you can hear that thing. It's a really creepy riff I came out, and I used to play with my feet. So it goes, blah, 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 blah. That was just kind of my giving the Bronx cheer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a fine song. We recut that song too, and we recut it, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, and we're like, let's revisit this. And Mick's sitting there, you know, and he's singing the lyrics. I go, Mick, what's a typewriter? You know, because the lyrics are typewriter. I was like, what's a typewriter?
What are you talking about there? What is it? What's that old people stuff you're talking about?
Did you just send them a fax? What?
Now you said you re-recorded this. This recording that's on the EP is from '81.
Oh, all the stuff was recorded in 2 weeks in '81 at the record plant.
And so next up is Waiting in Line. Now, Waiting in Line, when I first heard it, I said it sounds like it could have been an outtake from Laughing in the Dark with its harmonies and its production.
Yeah.
How'd you? I mean, who wrote this tune? What did you have? What was your input on it?
We used to the way these guys would sometimes, some of the stuff, and it gets a little foggy, was floating around in 80, 81, and 80 when they had a bunch of other tunes. But when I started working with them, we really arranged things on the fly. So there's you know, like a bass line or something like that, or a counter melody line that might appear in one of these songs might have just come from me, because we were working like working the tunes up. You know, it wasn't like, oh, here's the part you play. You know, I had like freedom to do whatever I want to, and I think I changed some of the stuff. I don't know if it was for the better or for the worse, but that's how we used to do stuff. I mean, that's pretty much how we still come. So Mick maybe would have had a lyric. He had the lyrics already down, or Mimi would have, you know, here's the chords, and then I'd come in and you know, if you listen like to the bass lines on some of the stuff, the bass lines are pretty melodic bass lines on some of them. So they're almost like counter melodies, and that comes from playing the shit live. Again,
as a 3-piece, yeah.
Yeah, and work it up.
You're like Spinal Tap. You're playing lead bass in Pezband.
Yes. Well, I made a business card for Pezband a couple of years ago, and you used to see well, you never did. There used to be cards for bands in the '60s, and they would have the name of the band in the middle, and on the top it would be like Mimi lead guitar.
Oh,
right?
I've seen pictures of them. I'm in all those great Facebook groups.
Okay,
because I love looking at all that stuff.
I made one for Pezband. Said Mimi lead guitar, John lead bass, Mick lead drums, and that's how I think of it.
I think I've seen that. I think you posted that on Facebook. I
was like, hey, this is what I think. This is what I think it should sound like.
So now next up was Fab Girlfriends, and it's kind of a party song. And I hear you're going to get a kick out of this because I'm looking at my questions here. The question goes, hey, when you guys were coming up, how important were the Beatles to you? Well, I already figured out the answer to that question.
Yeah, so Fab Girlfriends is the Who, though, really.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, so that it doesn't get any. I mean, that's the Who. I mean, it's like dong 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 dong. That's my generation. Sorry. It's like, there it is. I mean, what else do you need to know? I mean, I like the lyrics on that. I think the lyrics are really funny on that, and I wonder how Mick got away with writing them when he was married to whoever he was. That's kind of an interesting song. I like that song a lot.
That's a cool, like the whole album's cool, but I think the most interesting song on the record for me, I mean, because I think it's kind of shows where maybe Pezband was going at that particular point, is Russian Tanks. And I mean, you want to talk about politics here. It was very timely for '83 and very timely now. And
that's when the whole line was coming down there, and they were starting to send tanks in. The other weird thing, I mean, that's a weird influence too. If you listen to that tune, it's like based on a riff, and that riff is like, I swear to God, man, it's like from some AC/DC song that I can never pinpoint. but it sounds like
every AC/DC song sounds the same, though. To be fair, so
yeah, it does. Some of them are better than others, but that.
Oh yeah, I like AC/DC too, but like the way you talk about like the Beatles, like AC/DC is one of those bands. Like, yeah, you know what? They're cool, but I could go the rest of my life without ever hearing another AC/DC song ever again.
Oh, I could too, and I have for years at a time. It's like, okay, AC/DC. But if you listen to that tune, that's it's like based on a riff, because Mick likes a lot of that stuff. Like he likes Slade, you know.
Yeah.
and Slade and AC/DC, and he liked that stuff. And so it's like, okay, we'll just base this. We don't have to base it on a chord changes or something, or melodic changes. So if you listen to that is that power pop? Well, yeah, it is, except like it's not the Raspberry. I mean, it's the harder side of power pop. And there are bands that are like that. The Who are like that. And Cheap Trick like that.
I think power pop sometimes, I mean, and it's because it's kind of a non-description, because all the power pop bands are, I mean, it helps, pigeonhole things or pinpoint things, but they're just really good. It's just really good rock and roll. I mean,
yeah,
you do have the more.
Some of it's so referential and like costumes, and I hate that end of it. I really do. It's like that weird entertainment, costumey. We're gonna do this or that, have bangs or something. I don't like that stuff. I really don't.
It seems too affected. Like you're trying too hard at that point.
It's self-referential, and it's like, no, wrong, And so when Pezband would come out and play, I mean, we do stuff that we did when we were in high school sometimes. And when we were in high school, we'd play like Yardbirds tunes, right? When Mimi and I would play together, we'd do like Wish You Would, and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of where we really come from.
I've noticed that
music,
like the bands that get mentioned quite a bit in talking to all these guys, like as much as the Beatles' shadow hangs over, it's actually the Who, Jeff Beck, the Yardbirds, and David Bowie.
Yeah. Like, David Bowie to me, David Bowie I can take or leave, and I'm really in the, like,
you are in
me like
you are in the serious minority on that one, my man.
You said what? And maybe it's because I mean, the first time I saw Dave Bowie, when I was 19, I hitchhiked through England, and and I ended up at the second Glastonbury Festival.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thing they have every year.
Yeah.
This was the second year. And so, you know, it was like a proto rave. Everybody was zonked out on acid for 3 days. You know, all the English diggers were there, and they were a great band. I mean, like just tremendous music. And I'm asleep in front of this giant plastic pyramid, you know, kind of just feeling no pain. And it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden I hear ground control to major. And it's David Bowie got up on stage by himself and just did an acoustic set at like 5 in the morning. And I came back, and that's when Pezband got going, summer '71. I said, "Wow, do you guys ever listen to this guy? It was kind of interesting." They're like, "Yeah, I don't know who he is." And within a year, they were like completely into Bowie and the Spiders from Mars. And I just went a different way. I went into great African American music, and I didn't pay attention to the Spiders from Mars. You know, I could have cared less. But that's just me. Right?
Yeah, well, that's just it. Like, I mean, and like something that I noticed, like around the time David Bowie died, like a lot of people were heartbroken and they were very upset about it. But then the same people who were upset about David Bowie one week were making jokes about the Eagles the next week when Glenn Frey passed away. And it's like, you know what? I like Bowie and I like the Eagles too. So don't be a dick about it. Just because it's not somebody who you appreciate, the same way you said, you know, your bandmates were into Spiders from Mars, but you were playing soul music. Like, you can like both things, or you can just be respectful enough.
Yeah, and so like to me, but when I made that transition back then, like I said, to try to be an artist, try to be a musician, it's like I got really turned off by the whole entertainment aspect of it, like the costuming and the, you know, like people listening to music, or are they looking at somebody with orange hair and bloomers? You know, it's like, what's going on here? You know, and really, I love James Brown. Like I love James Brown. He's the world's greatest entertainer.
Did you see the James Brown movie that came out a couple years ago?
No, I have. Did you see it?
I watched it, and I mean, I'm probably not as familiar with James Brown as you are, but I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was a great movie, and the guy who they had playing him, that Chad Boseman, he's got a funky name. He's channeling James Brown. Like it's creepy watching him because he's just like him.
Good.
Like I think you might enjoy it, but you were there, so you might be able to nitpick a little. Well, no, that's not when that happened. That's not when this happened.
Biopics to me are like oh man, I mean the terrible Cadillac Records. Did you see that thing?
You know what? Everybody told me it wasn't worth watching, so I never put it on.
No, it's like embarrassingly bad, and I can't watch this stuff. It's like I'll start to watch something like that and I'll just fucking turn it off. It's like what is this? But
I'd be curious to hear what your opinion on the James Brown movie was. I
want to see that. I want to see the Miles thing too. That's supposed to be really good. The Miles biopic.
I haven't. You know what? I think I heard about that one. Yeah, I definitely haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah. 2 people I know and kind of respect said it was okay, so I'll pony up for it on Netflix when it comes out or something. But anyway, that's the thing with Bowie, and again, like okay, so now David Bowie is like going to be the thin white duke and do like funk music, and it's like, oh, I like Carlos Alomar and I like these guys, you know, but like right at that same time, you could have seen like James Brown. It's like, you guys are missing something here, you know. I'll never understand. I mean, I understand the whole entertainment value and the military industrial entertainment complex, but I don't have to buy into it. I'll put it that way.
Now, I'm curious. I mean, as long as we were on the subject, like you were around in the '70s. Did you hate the Eagles or did you like the Eagles?
You know, they were okay. I just never really got into them. But for a whole while too, if you wanted to get the real perspective of it, in '70, so they were like big in '72 is really when they started doing it. And so '72 Pezband, you know, nobody in Pezband liked the Eagles because they had mustaches.
Well, yeah, no, and that's, I mean, if that's right? You were talking about entertainment and everything like that, like part of your look is a thing, you know, like, because people see you first and you're like, well, if you see a band, I mean, I imagine if you saw a band with mustaches in '71 or '72, you pretty much already had it in your head what they sounded like.
Or mustache and a flannel shirt. So in the scene I was talking about, Ratzos and T.S. Henry Webb and all that stuff in Chicago in the 70s, before O'Banion's and the punk thing started like around 78. From there, 70 to maybe 76 or 77, the whole of Chicago proper, not the suburbs, but Chicago proper, were what I call bands named after horses. There was a band called Appaloosa, you know, and they were all kind of like we want to be in the Eagles, and they had stashes and beards and flannel shirts and sang in 3-part harmonies and stuff. So I was like trying to learn how to play bass and playing with African Americans, but I don't care about that stuff, you know.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I wanted to bring it back to. Was something I noticed in doing these interviews for this project, was that it seems like around Chicago, particularly, that playing in the city wasn't as big a draw as playing out in the suburbs. For bands
sure.
of that ilk.
Yes.
Do you have any, and I can't get a straight answer from anybody because nobody knows why. It was just one of those things that happened. Do you have any insight as to why the suburbs, like we're talking about, you know, Beginnings, Night Gallery, any number of clubs that I've heard mentioned, the Red Lion circuit around Rockford and Champaign, versus playing the Electric Playground or any of these bars downtown? Why was that such a big thing?
Because the city clubs, first of all, had jazz in them. And, like you could go hear jazz or funk or fusion in a lot of clubs all over the city. So city audiences that way, in which that's where I was playing, were those audiences like could give a flying fuck about going out to the sub. It's the same way now as America, but people could really not want to go to the suburbs and hear some band do Deep Purple covers. That was like square music to these people. So
because downtown was more into funk and jazz, on a whole.
And then when the Punky Wunky thing started up, that's where it started. You know, it's like O'Banion's and places like that.
So the city was more for punk than the suburbs.
Yeah, it was just hip. The city's always been hipper than the suburbs. Okay. Always.
Right. Sure. Yeah, that's why people, when they stop being cool, they all move out to the suburbs.
That's exactly right. So,
and I live in Beverly. I live in Beverly, so that's kind of like it's like the suburbs, but not really. Like, I always get shit because people are like, where do you live? I'm like, Chicago. And they're like, what neighborhood? And I'm like, Beverly. And they're like, oh, so technically you live in a city. It's like, no, I pay $120 for a city sticker on my car every year. I live in Chicago.
I love Beverly. So that's one thing, and the other thing is that, except for like me and maybe a few other people I know, that never crossed. You know what I mean? It's like people that did what I was doing didn't end up playing at Beginnings, although I did. But
people that were doing soul and funk, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, there were a couple of bands. There were a couple of like integrated soul funk flash fusion guys that wore space boots and shit, but that didn't really go over that well, you know. Because you know those guys I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that was that. So if I was going to be hanging out in my neighborhood in Rogers Park, or if I was going to go play at the Bowls or Minstrels or something like that, then I was not going to be playing at Thirsty Whale. Except for one club which completely fucked things up, and that was a bar in Rogers Park called Huey's. And Rogers Park, they're like literally, Mike, you could have played in 6 places. You could have played like 3 or 4 nights a week in Rogers Park. And Huey's was the rock club in Rogers Park. And there would be rock, and then there would be great funk bands playing there. Baby Huey and the Babysitters would play there. Ask Rufus, which became Rufus with Chaka Khan, would play there. And that was an interesting club. So rock bands would come in there and play. Cheap Trick played there. Pezband played there. Off Broadway played. Everybody played at Huey's. But at the end of the night, the hip musicians would come downstairs, and there was a club right below it called Minstrels, and that's where I would play, and T.S. Henry Webb would play, and other people would play. Junior Wells and Buddy Guy would play there. And it was interesting to see those guys come in and then go, oh, wow, you guys are doing something great. We just do these shitty covers upstairs. So it was always interesting for me to watch that. And then then a few years after that, when I was part of the shitty bands playing rock music in the suburbs, and we would play at Huey's, then I'd go downstairs in minstrels, and the guys in the bands of minstrels would be looking at me, they're in that shitty rock band upstairs, aren't you? It's like, fuck you. You know, I was standing right where you were 4 years ago, Chief. You know, enjoy the $30 you're making tonight. But anyway, that's another story.
Well, we could do a couple parts. The John Pazdan's history of Chicago music. This is great stuff.
These guys have been yapping about me doing that, but you know, I'm in the terrible navel-gazing baby boomer generation. If I hear another fucking, you know, I feel like I'm Zelig. Do you ever see the Woody Allen movie Zelig?
No, I've never seen that one.
It's about a guy who just is kind of like, well, here's the assassination of, you know, Lenin or something or whatever, you know, here's the start of World War I, and there's Woody Allen. He's like at the corner of the picture or the shot, you know, and then that's what I feel like. I'm like the Zelig here. And you want to hear the stuff from Zelig? Nah, I don't want to hear that. That doesn't mean anything. You know, go interview Tom Peterson. I mean,
yeah.
Oh, by the way, I got to bring this up. Did Mimi say anything about Tom being on Women in Politics?
He mentioned that he's doing and I wanted to bring it up too. He mentioned that he's doing the chanting on Russian tanks.
Yeah. So I'm real sure that, you know, he had all these great free bases, and he was out of Cheap Trick that summer.
Right.
Yeah, he was out of Cheap Trick for a couple of years.
He was doing another language record with Dagmar out being cool guy in New York, right?
Well, yeah, whatever. But
it's my buddy picked up the record, and because we're big Cheap Trick fans, we sat down and listened to it, and I don't remember. We put it on once, and nobody ever put it on again.
Yeah, well, you remember who came out at that time was Missing Persons, right?
Right.
Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dagmar. I mean.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. Okay. So, but I'm real sure he loaned. I'm real sure he loaned me this beautiful, like, the Japanese people used to give Cheap Trick. They just give him shit.
Oh, they were
like,
they were gods over there.
Yeah. So he had this beautiful Kawai, which wasn't a brand very well known in the States at that time. Beautiful 8-string bass, like it looked like it was made out of abalone, you know, and it was just beautiful. I think I used that on Russian tanks, if I'm not mistaken. And so at the end we had the gang vocal of everybody going, hoo ha, hoo.
Yeah.
So he was floating around the studio, like, come here, go hoo ha. So, but that's not. I told Mimi, I said, we got to put this on the fucking record. It'll be worth like 100 records sold in Japan. You know.
Absolutely. I mean, that's marketing right there. That's smart.
But he didn't put it on. It's like, fuck. Did you forget? Jeez.
Oh, he didn't put it on the Japanese record that went out there. What?
Well, the Japanese one is the same one as him. I mean, there's only 500 of these.
Yeah.
So, and I don't. They're never going to make a second pressing. Then they'll put them out on, you know, like maybe it's downloads or something.
Russian Tanks isn't on the record?
No, it's on the record. But I wanted to get Tom Peterson like.
Oh, you wanted to put his vocals by Tom Peterson.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Put that on the sticker. Put that on the sticker.
Oh, a sticker, even better. I was looking at the sticker. I love Japanese record stores. I just fucking love them. You go in there and like you're looking at your record and it's like that's the record, all right, but I don't recognize it. You know. so on these records, they always put a sticker on with the Japanese. You know.
Yeah.
Like what it is, and on every one of them, they put the sticker over my face on the cover. It's like. Will that help sales or hinder them? You know, is that gonna boost sales or is it gonna take away?
So speaking of getting the record out there, are there any plans for any more Pezband shows this year or next year?
I'm trying to, but it's like fucking herding cats sometimes. We're gonna play. I think there's a record store in Logan Square called Bric-a-Brac that's selling the records. And they are going to have a little festival in Logan Square under the statue at the end of summer. So like right around Labor Day or right before Labor Day. And I think we're going to play that. I want to go, play on the East Coast, and I just talked to Paul Collins last week, and he's like a working maniac. I love that guy. It's like he's got my work ethic. It's like this is what I do. I'm gonna go out and play. And it's like that's what I do. So I don't know if we're gonna do that. I'm gonna go back to Brooklyn and then go play Boston with Paul and the great Boston punk band called the Liars. You know those guys?
Yes, I do.
That's a great bill.
Awesome.
We were gonna go out with Dwight and my friend Ronnie Flint is
Dwight Twilley's been playing a lot lately. Like
but he's been playing by himself.
Yeah.
And he can't afford to take the Tulsa Mafia with him because they're not paying enough.
Well, sure.
Out to do it.
I mean, you guys are all independent artists again. You don't have a label backing you anymore.
Yeah, except Dwight's band is like those guys are really good. I mean, nobody ever heard of them before, and they just play around Tulsa, but they're fucking great. And I just wish he could go out with them. So we were talking about doing that and Pezband. And on the last tour Dwight did, their bass player was really sick, so he got Ronnie Flint, who was the co-leader of 2020. To go out with them and play bass. And that was a really good band. So I started talking to Ronnie on the road, and I was like, fuck, man, we should go out. 2020 Pezband and Dwight Twilley would be a wonderful bill.
Absolutely.
But again, it's like herding fucking cats. Like we're not the cornerstones of Chicago rock, like we're, I said that as sarcastically as I could. But I think it would be a really, really good, strong bill. I mean, that's the kind of bill like you could do England with,
Yeah, I'd go see that bill. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, anybody I talk to would go see the bill, but it's just a matter of like, we got to get money. We're some of these people aren't musicians anymore. They're kind of like Ronnie is a studio in Austin, and Steve Allen, the guitar player, is a studio in Nashville. So if we're talking about taking 2 weeks off of work for those guys, that's like some serious thing. You got to come up with some money. And I just power pop and power pop, but power pop, I don't know. Promoters don't like to hear those two words anymore. So
there was a minute where it was cool again, and now it just seems to be passé again. But it'll come back in another 5 years, probably.
Yeah, possibly, and then we're going to be in our 70s going,
oh bullshit! You'll be out playing.
I'm going to be out playing. I'm doing stuff starting by myself, and I do like occasional music. I do like original track work for like little documentaries and bullshit like that. Not bullshit, good stuff.
Good stuff, but just little things like to keep yourself.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not one of the Newman brothers, scoring stuff in Hollywood, but I like what I do. I mean, I'm doing the music for biopic about Dr. Quentin Young, who just passed away. Famous Chicago doctor who was head of physicians for single payer.
Oh,
do you know that guy?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But I'll look him up.
A very important man and a hero of mine. So they're doing a movie on him, doing music for it. But other than that, I've been collaborating with people on the internet for like 15 years, 20, I don't know, for a long time. And I realized I've done stuff. I've done records with these people over the internet. I'll do a track, they'll do a track, they send it back and forth. And I realized I have never met a lot of them, and I've never sat in a room with them and had a smoke or drank a beer or anything with these guys. And so last year, one of them really wanted me to come to Budapest, and I was like, yeah, okay, and he's like, oh, we'll put you up, we'll, get you, you do everything. Okay, think about it. And then he died, and it's like, fuck, man. So I'm gonna go. Probably early fall, I think. I was going to go end of summer, and it's going to be like early fall. I'm going to go to London, play with a couple people, and then go to Amsterdam, play with this guy I've been working with, go down to Provence and play with a guy, and then end up in Pazdan and play with a guy, and then go to Berlin and play with another group. So all these people I've recorded with and known for years, who I consider my friends, I've never met, and I just think that sucks,
Yeah.
I really, it's like so. Oh, it's 2016. It's like, oh, fuck that. I
just get out. You got to get out there and meet everybody. I mean, I guess.
Yeah, and I like playing in Europe, and I like traveling. I love London. It's like, fuck, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Well, let's. I wanted to wrap it up only because I've got to get to my job, my regular gig too. If you wouldn't
What are
mind,
you doing these days?
I tend bar. I still tend bar.
Oh, where?
Chili's out in Orland Park.
Okay, I'm not going to go visit you then. But I thought maybe.
No, yeah. You know, I've been there. It started as a part-time gig to get myself through school, and I started making more money there, and I was happier there than doing the accounting thing. So
that sounds right.
And the writing.
Hey, Mike, I know a lot of lawyers that like really busted their nuts to go to law school and spend a lot of money, and they were lawyers for like 2 years.
She could hold you down, don't you wait too long, she'll let it get around, you've done something wrong, it's a sad scene, it's a sad affair, look around, you'll see she's not there, I've seen good boys who believe what she said, she would sing them lies, they were simply misled, she's a sad scene, she's a sad affair, look around, you'll see she's not there. Oh, cover your heart, boy. Don't fall apart, boy. Just close your eyes and dream. You'll see what I mean. Was it last night you were left alone? Did she run out? Say goodbye, say so long.